Hello everyone, Lawrence here from Unicorn Reviews with the review of the Gigabyte Aorus GA-AX370 Gaming 5. Quite a long name. Now this is the 5, so it's below the 7 and it's above the 3. So it's somewhere in the middle of the Gigabyte more high-end lineup. So this board is probably between 220 270 euros depending on which store you buy it from. I bought mine on Ryzen launch date. I have been testing every single BIOS so far. This entire review is based on the F5D BIOS, which is still in beta. So let's start off with a physical overview of the product. As you can see, it's a black PCB with white plastic accents. There's this charcoal black on the heatsinks, again with plastic accents. And then there's of course the RGB lighting. So you get 3 RGB strips in between the DIMMs in between the RAM slots. You also get lighting on the right side of the motherboard next to your power connector. And then there's some LEDs around the M.2 slots, around the PCI slots, and at the top around the VRMs as well. The 8-pin goes in at the top. You get the 24-pin power as well. That's all the power connectors you have here. There are a bunch of fan connectors. So there's one fan connector next to the 8-pin. Then there is 2 for the CPU fan. One of them is a dedicated pump one. So if you're running an all-in-one liquid cooler and you need that 12 volts constantly, you'll have that header right there. And there are more fan headers spread all over the motherboard. You have dual USB 3.0 headers as well. There's 2 SATA Express connections and 8 SATA 3 connections. At the bottom you have your usual HD audio connector, 2 switches to switch between BIOSes. There's the TPN connector, then there's dual USB 2 headers, your LED poster, so if something goes wrong you know what's wrong. And then there are of course the usual front panel connections as well. So the PCIe layout is pretty simple. You just get a 1X slot up top, then there's an X16 slot underneath that for your graphics card. Underneath that is a 4X slot for M.2 drives. You then get another 1X slot followed by another 8X slot. So if you're going to go with Crossfire or SLI, the board supports both those things. You have an 8X slot there as well, followed by yet another 1X slot, and then all the way at the bottom is a X4 slot. Let's move into the more gimmicky features. There's the power switch and an OFC button, along with a CMOS switch and a reset switch on the right top of the motherboard. All the way at the bottom are 2 connectors for temperatures. So you have these extra temperature dongles so you can measure air temperatures or liquid temperatures in your system as well. Pretty cool. Of course, with RGB being such a big thing lately, there's an RGB LED header next to the CPU socket, and there's another one at the bottom so you can hook up your case RGB lights to your motherboard to get everything nicely synced up. You even get a little extension cable for that, so that's pretty handy. Also in the box are labels, so you can label your cables, 2 wires for the temperature sensors, and a bunch of SATA 3 cables. So the rear I/O is pretty cool with this motherboard. All the way at the top is a DAC port, and basically this is for audio out stuff, so when you're using an external DAC, but it's also for your keyboard, your mouse. This is USB 3.0, and what's cool about it is you can offset the voltage, so you can have it at the stock 5 volts, but also at 5.1, 5.2, and you can also turn off power delivery altogether there. Underneath that is a normal USB 3.0 port and an HDMI out in case you're putting an APU in later. Of course, Ryzen doesn't have a built-in GPU, but who cares? Then underneath that is an S-Media USB 3.1 Gen 2 controller. And this one will give you a Type-C port and a Type-B port at 10 gigabits a second. Again, underneath that we have more USB 3.0s, 4 of them, and then dual Ethernet ports. Now, one of them is by Intel, the other one is by Killer. And then all the way at the bottom, that's where your audio is. So when you're looking at the BIOS in the easy mode, the first thing that you notice is that half the stuff isn't supported. Is that down to me just using a 1700 non-X? Who knows? I don't know, but it's just an incredibly limited thing. The only thing you can really do is change around the fan modes, and that's pretty cool. You have a manual fan speed mode, and you can set that to your CPU, external case fans, all that sort of stuff. It's really nice that you can have it at 0%, so when idling the fans are off completely and the system is completely inaudible. However, once you move back into the classic mode, which I guess is where most people are going to spend their time, you really notice just how limited it is. Sure, it's great that you can mess around with what language the BIOS is in, but that's about the only functionality there is really. So in the system you can just see the BIOS version you're on at the time. Then you have some BIOS boot mode, so what device you're booting from. Peripheral wise, again, not an awful lot of stuff to play with other than the RGB fusion. So that's just the color of the LEDs on your motherboard, which is, let's face it, the main reason you're buying this board, just for the RGB lighting. And then there's more stuff with the chipset, the power, the usual stuff there really. It's very limited, as you can see. Going into the overclocking stuff, that's where you can really see how limited the BIOS is. It's actually quite disturbingly limited. You can only change around the ratio for all cores at once. You can't enable or disable certain cores. You can't set it to overclock just 2 out of 8 cores, stuff like that. Pretty disappointed with that. Now, as I said, I've been on every single BIOS so far, and what struck me with F5D is that while it is supposed to help with DDR compatibility, so just make your memory more stable really, it's also made my CPU less stable, so I can now only get it up to 3.6 GHz at stock voltage. So let's talk included software. So basically the only thing you're really going to mess around with is the RGB lighting, and there is an RGB Fusion app for that. Of course you need to install Gigabyte's App Center first, which is like an extra control panel. Now in this RGB Fusion app you can have a few more modes than you have in the BIOS. So you have pulse, music, where the LEDs react to the music you're playing, color cycling, static LEDs, flashy LEDs, just random flashing colors, a waveform if you have multiple LED strips connected to it, and then there's also intelligent. Now with all these modes you can set the brightness and the color, and with the intelligent mode the cool thing is you can have the LED color changed according to CPU temperature, CPU usage, case airflow temperature, all that sort of stuff, which is pretty neat, but it doesn't make up for the crappy BIOS sadly. So for a conclusion on the Gigabyte Aorus GA-AX370 Gaming 5, I can't really be positive about it. I really wish I bought something else instead of this one. It looks good, the RGB stuff is nice, it has good I/O, a lot of connectivity options, that's all great, but the BIOS is so limiting that I really feel like I can't really push my CPU a lot with it. Now it doesn't say that it's an overclocking board, but I mean, the BIOS just isn't there for a board in this price range. So anyway guys, if you like this video, please press that like button. If you didn't, hit that dislike button or the subscribe button if you want to make a video that you do like. Now, if you want more frequent updates, there's Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. And if you want to really support the channel, there's a Patreon link for that in the description. For now, thank you very much for watching and I'll see you guys in the next one.